So, if you've clicked on this video, there is a good chance that you are struggling to come to grips with the new combat system in Assassin's Creed Origins, and you're probably not very good at it. But if this is you, do not worry. If you're shit, I'm only half shit. I'm going to use that half of me that's not shit to try to give you some tips that might help you last longer in combat. In order to get the right idea, first of all we need to ditch that delightful sensation of button mashing right away. We do not need to do that at all. So yeah, now that you know that button mashing won't help you, let's get into the tips. So the first tip that I have when you're in combat, it seems a bit obvious, but lock on to your enemy. If you're running around not locking on, there's a higher chance that you'll miss and leave yourself open. Now you've got to manually do it, and believe me, a lot of people forget how. What you've got to do, I do believe, is press down on the right stick to lock on. I'm not sure about PlayStation controls. If it's mapped in the same way, it will be the right stick. As for PC, I'm not entirely sure as I've used a controller for my entire playthrough. But of course, for a first point, locking on is almost crucial, because otherwise you'll find yourself struggling. If you're up against a harder enemy, locking on is a good idea, because once locked onto an enemy, you can evade in the right way, evade their attacks, you can attack yourself and time your attacks better, and you can analyze your enemy and see just what pattern they are using and use that knowledge to your advantage. So locking on is a much more important thing than first perceived. Next tip that I have for you is to make sure that your gear is up to date. Now you can actually go to a blacksmith and upgrade your weapon to be your current level, and usually that yields some pretty good results. As you level up and go through the world, it is important that you level up your gear with you and make sure you're carrying gear that is close to your level. At the same time, you need to be hunting to craft upgrades for your hidden blade, your arrows, your bracer, your stabilizer glove, your breastplate, and your tool satchel. You need to make sure that all of these are kept up to date all the time if possible. In order to get these resources, get Senu and fly up as far as Senu will go, and then Senu will see loads of different places where resources can be found. As much as it's important to keep leveling up, it's important to make sure that all your gear is up to your level at the same time. If this isn't the case, then the combat is more than likely going to be harder than it has to be. Moving on, my next tip for you is to make sure that you are actually investing skills into the warrior tree, no matter what playstyle you're going through. There will be situations in the game where combat is inevitable, and having at least some combat skills will be helpful here. So even if you want to go full stealth, it's always good to invest the occasional perk into warrior, because that will not be a wasted perk, especially in combat situations. Like I said, you will run into one regardless of whether or not you want to, and having these extra skills is really helpful, trust me. If you haven't invested any perks at all into warrior because you think that full stealth is a great idea, then perhaps maybe now's the time to invest the occasional perk into the warrior ability, so that when you're faced with a difficult combat situation, you're not fucked. In the spirit of not being royally screwed, it's really wise to keep an eye on your adrenaline gauge, which can be found just above your health bar on the HUD in-game. Now when it fills, make sure you hit down on the buttons that it says to hit so that you can access your adrenaline mode, in which you become more powerful and faster and release frenzied attacks which defeat your enemies faster, and it can help in situations where you might be ever so slightly overwhelmed. If there's a boss fight who's ever so slightly too hard, using the adrenaline might just win you that fight. Warning though, you don't become invincible. Also keep an eye on the colour of the gauge. If it's blue, you will release a very well timed stab attack that will probably instantly kill one of your enemies, but if it is yellow, then it will release frenzied attacks. Moving on to a very quick point, when fighting aggressive animals such as crocodiles, lions and etc., apparently it's best to use a spear. I mean, I can see the logic behind this, however all I tend to do is just swing my sword, and as you can see here, that's not getting me very far. Next up, I have a bit of advice for when you run into the fire lakes, or however you pronounce that, and they might be too high a level for you. If you're not max level, they usually are. So my advice for you when facing these fire lakes is run away. Yeah, if you are not ready for that boss fight, the only thing you can really do is run away. I know it is quite annoying because the fire lakes can show up at the most inconvenient of times, but you've just got to run away and remember that one day you will get them back for interfering with your business. Also rejoice in the fact that you won't die. But this point can be applied to any enemy who isn't quite your level. If you come across an enemy who is a higher level than you and you cannot quite face them in combat, say if the number above their head is red or there is no number there and it's a skull and you don't particularly fancy risking it, the best thing for you to do will be to evaluate your situation and concocting a new strategy that doesn't involve alerting these specific enemies. Moving on, if you find yourself overwhelmed in direct confrontation, I have found that the bow is a very good panic buffer, and by that I mean you can fall back a little bit and just fire arrows at people's heads, and that will probably yield better results than your fighting if you find yourself low on health. This usually works for me, and remember, if you aim for the head you do critical damage and you might even one hit kill certain enemies. It will actually tell you how much damage your bow will do, so if you've got an arrow aimed at somebody and their health bar goes full red, let it fly. So always remember to keep stocked up on arrows because they might just save your life. The best bows for combat are probably the light bow and the warrior bow. One fires multiple arrows one after the other, and the warrior bow just fires multiple arrows at once. Both are incredibly useful, but which one you prefer is down to preference. I personally prefer the light bow because you can fire arrow after arrow into somebody's face, which, as sadistic as that sounds, is oddly satisfying. All in all, archery can be a very useful combat tool and one that you should definitely not dismiss. So investing a few perks into archery based things is a good idea. Also make sure that that quiver is upgraded properly so that you can carry many arrows, because it's always good to keep some ammunition on you, and the more you have the better and the more damage that you can do. Another thing that I've noticed and thought it would be worth mentioning is that you can actually use the environment to your advantage. For example, some pots contain oil. If you burst that pot with an arrow, the oil will spill everywhere and it might catch light. That will probably burn your enemy a little bit and do some damage. So always pay attention to your surroundings because they might just be very helpful in the fight. For example, I'm pretty sure that aggressive animals hate your enemies just as much as they hate you. Don't feel afraid to unleash them as long as you think you can handle them afterwards or escape them. Okay, now remember how I said at the start of the video, don't button mash? Well, don't button mash, alright? When you attack, try to time it properly. I suppose there are times when you can button mash, for example when you've hit adrenaline, because everything's so fast that button mashing actually does something. But when you're in combat situations, do not button mash, keep a level head and time your attacks. Raise your shield, block attacks that come in, and immediately afterwards counter attack them, or make sure that you do something that compromises your enemy's fighting style. For example, enemies with small shields can have their block be broken with a heavy attack. Enemies with bigger shields cannot, so you have to wait for them to attack, dive to the left or to the right of them, and then attack them from behind. Always make sure to save your adrenaline gauge for those enemies who look like they might provide more of a challenge without it. This will help you greatly. For example, bigger enemies with heavy attacks, you probably can get up close and personal and take them out in seconds with the adrenaline. And my final point for today is that stealth can be helpful too. So if you don't particularly fancy the odds of open conflict, maybe a stealthier approach might help you take down, say, this camp or whatever quicker than, say, combat would, or maybe just more effectively, or maybe just come out the other end with you not dead. So there you have it, everybody. Those are my tips for combat. I mean, like I said, if you are struggling with the combat in this game. Hopefully I've helped you out here. Obviously I haven't been very helpful with controls because I only play one platform, that being PC with an Xbox controller, so I don't know the controls for, say, PC, keyboard and mouse, or PlayStation 4. I don't know the controls for them, but hopefully what I have said here does help you. Thank you to whoever suggested this on the community tab, which is a cool little thing. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy my tips, and I hope that as a result you'll at least have some chance in the combat, because believe me, I'm not particularly great at it. I just don't think I'm fully terrible at it, so I thought I'd extend my knowledge to you, and now we're all semi-shit together, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to belittle anybody, I'm just saying I'm not good either. I've just noticed some things. I'm gonna stop talking, so thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know what you think down in the comment section, and be sure to share your tips, because I'm sure that you all have different styles to doing things than mine, and I'm sure that somebody's will be better. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon.